Hello, my name is Michael Ibanez, and today I'll be talking about Dana White and how he expanded the UFC from where it started out to where it is today. So first, the UFC stands for the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and it's a sport where fighters compete using different forms of martial arts to see who's the best. So first, the UFC started out when the Gracie family claimed that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was the most dominant form of martial arts. So they held a competition where fighters from various backgrounds, such as boxing, Muay Thai, wrestling, Taekwondo, they all came to compete to see who was the best. It started out with not too many rules. There wasn't any rounds. There wasn't a time limit. It was really kind of a fight to the death mentality to see who was the best. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu did prove to be the strongest martial art. So over time, fighters took note of this and they learned that they needed to become competent in all forms of martial arts to be the best. So fighters learned how to strike, how to wrestle. They learned jiu-jitsu to be the most well-rounded fighters. And that's really what it takes to be great in that sport. So Dana White first took interest into martial arts when he was 17, when he began boxing. And as the UFC became more popular, he also gained interest in jiu-jitsu. So him and a childhood friend, Lorenzo Ferretta, took jiu-jitsu classes, and they immediately fell in love with it. They loved how hard it was, the time it took to master the craft, and just everything about it. So with that interest, Dana White began managing some of the fighters. Two of the biggest fighters he managed were Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell. These two fighters were huge in the early expansion of the UFC, which really made it more popular. So next, there was an opportunity arose where the UFC was up for sale. So Dana White called Lorenzo Ferretta and his brother, and they bought the UFC for $2 million. This is quite a huge swing because now it is worth over $3 billion. So really, they took the right risk at the right time. So the UFC primarily makes their money from pay-per-view sales. You can see the figure here on the right. UFC 82 sold almost 800,000 pay-per-views at either $50 or $60, depending on if you want to get it in HD or not. So this is really where they make most of their money. They also make their money from ticket sales. You can see here the figure shows that tickets average around $500 each, and that's trending up as the years are going by. Also, some of these ringside seats can cost over $2,000. During Dana White's tenure as CEO of the UFC, he also bought out the WEC and Strikeforce. This was huge because those two organizations were really the only competition they had as far as mixed martial arts organizations. He also made a deal with Fox, which they started airing UFC fights on cable TV so everyone can watch. This was huge and expanding because now everyone can watch these events without having to pay $50 or $60. Also, he started the show The Ultimate Fighter, which is really a reality show where 20 fighters compete to see who's the best in order to get a contract into the UFC. This also helped expand because people can now tune into a weekly show to watch mixed martial arts and gain interest. Also, the emergence of all these gyms you see, jiu-jitsu gyms, gyms such as American Top Team, you can kind of credit Dana White for the success of all these gyms because he really expanded mixed martial arts and the UFC. Also, the emergence of female athletes has been huge for the UFC. You see now Ronda Rousey is probably the biggest draw for UFC, and that's really kind of unprecedented to see a female athlete be the face of a sport where both men and women compete. Also, the UFC started, or actually for a while have been hosting events overseas. They've hosted events in Dubai, Australia, London, Ireland, and a lot of different countries, which you don't see in too many sports. One of the things Dana White kind of takes some heat for is not really compensating the fighters as well as he should. They say the average fighter makes around $24,000 a year, which is not a lot at all, and they really only fight twice per year. So unless you're one of the big, the top name fighters, you're really not making too much money. One of the ways fighters can also make money is these fight of the night bonuses, which can be $50,000, which is a lot more than these athletes make in a whole year. So again, unless you're one of the top guys, you're really not making too much money. Another thing that's going to hurt the fighters' pay is a deal the UFC made with Reebok. So Reebok is now the exclusive outfitter of these fighters, and these fighters can no longer put all different types of sponsors on their shirts or shorts, which is also really hurting their pay. Overall, Dana White has done a lot to expand the UFC from where it started to where it is today, and that has made him really successful. To me, this is a classic example of being at the right place, or being at the right place at the right time and taking the right risk at the right time, and it has made him very successful.